Taoiseach, contrary to mainstream economic theory, all wealth in our society is generated by workers. And it is very, very obvious now that we are chronically short of the skills and workers we need in a whole range of areas: construction, the health service, teaching, bus drivers, hospitality, you name it. And of course the reason we are short is because it is unaffordable for tens of thousands of people who qualify in the professions and the trades to live here, because housing is completely unaffordable, confirmed again by the Chartered Surveyors today with the affordability gap they highlight for ordinary workers. And therefore tens and tens of thousands of skilled workers, people leaving college, qualifying in the trades, are leaving the country when we need them desperately. So my question to you is, what are you going to do to make housing affordable? And will you agree with our proposal that under the new Planning and Development Act, 50% of all new housing should be, as a minimum, designated for social and affordable housing?
To thank the deputies for raising their questions. I think that Deputy Boyd Barrett is quite right to say that wealth is generated by workers, but there's different forms of workers and different forms of wealth, and a lot of wealth is generated by innovation, by creating new things, and we need to always bear that in mind, that entrepreneurship, there's a lot of research that would show that 75% of all new global growth in recent decades has been driven by innovation and by new inventions and entrepreneurships, not people doing the same things, but doing new things. In terms of skilled people leaving the country, Deputy Boyd Barrett is absolutely correct. There are skilled people leaving the country for lots of different reasons. There are way more skilled people coming into the country every year. We're a country that has net migration of skilled people into Ireland. That's been the case for a very long time. And as I pointed out earlier to deputies, even if you narrow down just Irish citizens, 80,000 left in the past 3 years, but 90,000 returned. So notwithstanding the high cost of housing and the high cost of living, skilled people are pouring into this country because of the jobs that are available, and more Irish citizens are returning to the country than are leaving, and these are just the facts. In terms of what we can do to make housing more affordable, increasing incomes is a big part of that. It's the incomes to house price ratio that matters the most. Help to Buy really helps huge numbers of people to get their deposit for their first home. The derelict grants help a lot too, and it's good to see dereliction now falling. First home makes a big difference in terms of closing the affordability gap, and also construction of much more social housing, because social housing benefits everyone, not just those who are taken off the housing list by getting a home. Also helps to bring down the cost of housing generally and makes more places available to rent. I did take a look at the SEI report that's been reported on today, and I think it has been misreported, unfortunately, and I can understand why people misunderstood it. It specifically says that they don't include the first home scheme in their calculations, and that would close the affordability gap, indeed eliminate it in a lot of cases, and it only applies to 3-bed new semi-detached homes. And most people don't buy 3-bed new semi-detached homes. Most people buy homes that aren't new, and most first-time buyers will tend to buy 2 beds rather than 3 beds. And I think it's been, as is often the case with these reports, incorrectly reported by elements of the media and then incorrectly quoted by politicians, which is regrettable but happens very, very regularly. In relation to Deputy Murphy's comments, we're not planning to introduce an internet tax. That was one option of many that was considered by the working group. The disadvantages were clear, that it would not just be a 1 or 2% levy, it would have to be 10 or 15 euros a month, which would be too high. And also there'd be huge difficulties in applying exemptions, which we currently apply, for example, to people on very low incomes and to pensioners. So it didn't jump out of the report as a good option. It jumped out of the report as a not very good option, but it's always important to consider all options. In relation to Deputy Moynihan's comments, as I acknowledged earlier, the cost of doing business is very high, and it is rising, and that's particularly so for the hospitality sector and also very labour-intensive sectors like retail, for example. While we are seeing a lot of cafes and restaurants closing, there's also a lot opening too, and a lot that are very hard to get into, have a lot of business and are very busy. We're not seeing any evidence yet of employment levels falling in the hospitality sector yet, but we do need to monitor for that and watch out for that very closely. As I said before, there's no point in putting up people's wages if the net result is they lose their job or they have their hours cut, but we're not seeing much evidence of that yet. In terms of businesses struggling, help is on the way. €250,000 will be injected into small businesses between now and the end of March to help them with their costs. The tax warehousing scheme remains in place, but tax can't be withheld forever. Businesses do have to pay their taxes, and bear in mind some of that tax is PAYE. It's money that people earned a year or two ago that hasn't yet been paid to the revenue. And also we are seeing energy costs falling. I think that is encouraging. In relation to VAT rates, for most of the past 30 years, the VAT rate for hospitality has been between 12.5% and 13.5%. On a temporary basis, it was reduced to 9% after the financial crash and during COVID. In the run-up to the budget, we did consider separating accommodation for food service. That is technically possible, would take time to implement, but the cost unfortunately ran into the hundreds of millions of euros, and a decision was made for that reason not to proceed with it. In relation to Belcamp Manor, just like Deputy O'Callaghan and everyone in the House, I don't like to see investment funds buying up family homes. We changed the law in 2021 to prevent that from happening. This particular permission was granted in 2019, so it was granted 2 years before the law changed. The stamp duty is currently 10%. Clearly that didn't deter the investment fund in this case from buying these homes. Sinn Féin is saying it should be 17%. I think the Social Democrats are saying 100%. That's not the way you do tax policy. We need to examine this properly, work out what the effective amount would be, and also make sure that we're very careful about any unintended consequences, which often happen in tax policy. And then just finally, on artificial intelligence, really important topic that we really need to give a lot of consideration to, was the main topic of a discussion in Davos last week, and it is a powerful technology with potential enormous benefits for society and our economy, but one that also has some risks too. My only regret is that it's actually described as artificial intelligence, because that gives people the impression that it's something that it's not, and it's not anything approaching human intelligence. These are machines that can do calculations very fast. Yeah, I'll have to check. I'll ask Deputy Richard to come back to you on that.
Okay, go Marty.